Well, thank you very much, and welcome, Mr. Carl Fravel, to Building on Blockchain. Thank you for giving me some of your very precious time.
Oh, you're very welcome. This is going to be fun.
I agree. I've been looking forward to this chat. The more that I've learned about you and your work with Decentraland, the more questions that I've come up with, and the more excited I've been to talk to you and to pick your brain about what exactly working through this process is like. It's very interesting to me. Without further ado, do you think you could fill us in on your background briefly, pre blockchain, pre crypto, as to kind of what direction you were going in and how that made its way into your life?
Yes, way back in college days, I was a music major after starting as a psychobiology major, and then I added a second major of computer science. So I like, a voracious appetite for learning. And, at the intersection between kind of how the mind works, how technology works, and how sound is, music works. Um, Music is important for ensemble as well as development of various other aspects of brain function and learning skills. And so my first paying gig in computer programming was in my freshman year of college, and I've been earning most of my living ever since in that area. Although I've also been in the pro audio industry some of my career. I worked at a synthesizer company for a while. I had a synthesizer accessories company for a while that did a pitch follower. And I think I'm on my 12th company now. I'm working at a inland marine transportation company in New Orleans as its director of IS. So I have a team of about 15
Okay.
people. So a lot of responsibility here. But I've always been interested in kind of the overlap between technology and various kinds of human expression, like music and digital filmmaking,
Sure.
and now virtual reality. My first exposure to virtual reality was I came to New Orleans to accept a job as the VP of engineering at TurboSquid, which is really the leading online marketplace for 3D model artists to sell their wares. And it's here in New Orleans. I came here to do that, and
Okay.
spun out from that after a year or two to do some consulting, and ended up at Canal Barge Company, which is my day job. But while I was at TurboSquid, I had an opportunity to learn about Second Life. This would have been in 2009, so 10 years ago. I'm coming up on 11 years now or something.
Okay.
And created an account there and started looking around. And, it was a little primitive at first. And I wouldn't say I was highly engaged. But maybe 4 years later, I visited it again and was, pretty blown away at how far along it had come, what you could do, how beautiful the presentation had become, and how what a massive social experience had developed there. Um, you know, there's been nearly 1 million people that have created avatars and been in world there, and there's about 25,000 locations, and they're pretty good sized locations, and they're everything from gorgeous to very dirty, and everything in between. And it's interesting artistically, but it's also very interesting socially. There's all kinds of social groups and social dynamics there. So virtual worlds are, I think, really an important future human endeavor, experience venue, for education, for communication, for collaboration, for entertainment, telemedicine, all kinds of education at all levels. So, I became pretty interested and pretty involved in Second Life. And then a few years ago, Second Life, the company behind it, Lindeland, decided to make a new a virtual platform called Sansar. And I got involved in the preview of that pretty early on. And I wrote a book on how to build scenes there, how to build experiences in Sansar, and published it as a Kindle book, Sansar Builder's Guide. And around the time that book came out, I just really I finally paid attention that blockchain and cryptocurrency, and had a friend of a friend, a son of a friend of mine, who was very advanced in that field, Adam Levine. So I reached out to him and said, hey, give me a briefing on this. Can I have an hour or two of your time? Mm-hmm. And he gave me an overview of the whole blockchain, cryptocurrency landscape, what he was doing, what he thought was interesting to do and what to not bother with. So I never set up mining, but I started looking at some really interesting companies and looking at them the same way a VC would look at a startup, which is find all kinds of reasons to say no. And maybe a few of them survived that process, right. That are, doing something that you understand, that makes sense to you, and you think has a lot of potential, and that the team is really solid. In that process, I got introduced to the founders of Decentraland, and who had met with him at one point for some advice that he was provided them, I think. And they invited me to be an advisor to their company. In the areas of other virtual realities and in community development. And I jumped right in. Pretty much all my spare time since then has been spent on the development of Decentraland in many ways. I got, I ended up with some land. I ended up contributing to 9 of the districts in Decentraland. One of those I sponsored myself, which is a conference center. And part of the reason I picked a conference center was because I figured that, people are going to be dazzled by the technology and the lights and the experience, but once in a while they may want to actually go sit and talk somewhere about the future, about what they're doing, and have a meeting, have a conference, get an office space, do telework, whatever. So I sponsored a conference center and ended up with 799 land parcels contributed to it. It's actually one of the moderately large districts in Decentraland. And it's right next to the university, which is actually even a little bit larger. And I was recently asked to be the Chancellor of the university there. So very honored by that request, and I did accept it.
That's awesome. Congratulations, by the way. That's something
Thank you.
There's so many different questions I have about your story and your journey along the way. So, first off, it sounds like Second Life and your introduction to Second Life, that virtual world and that aspect of VR, was the first time VR started to play a major role in your life?
Yes.
What did that feel like when you first were blown away or captivated by what you were seeing?
Yeah, even though it doesn't use virtual reality headset, it just uses your computer screen. It's a pretty immersive experience. Within a few minutes of really being engaged with it, you're in that world, even though you're not fully surrounded. It's not as immersive as wearing a VR headset in an immersive reality like that. Okay. But it's as good or better than movies, because movies can be pretty immersive, but this is interactive and very social. So that was one thing, I guess. And then I found out that there's a whole lot of things you can do in virtual reality or virtual worlds. Not only can you develop a personal identity with an avatar and tweak its appearance and get clothing, but you can make friends. You can go, sailing or flying or fishing or golfing or playing pool. I mean, Second Life has very advanced scripting capabilities for what it can do in world. At one point, my wife and I, we've been married almost 40 years, decided to renew our wedding vows as a marriage of avatars in Second Life. And, we had guests coming from all over the world. We had all our family there.
What was that like?
It was beautiful.
Was it challenging organizing something like that to take place?
Not like a real marriage. Not a real wedding. You send out invitations, you provide links, I wrote a little document about how to get into Second Life for people who've never done it before. There's a little learning curve. Suggested people come in, a little in advance and learn how to walk and chew gum at the same time.
That's incredible. Was it a fun time? Did it last long? Was it?
Yeah, it was. We had a ceremony with prayers and music and a bunch of guests in a very beautiful place, and then we went to another very beautiful place and had a reception, and food and dancing
Wow.
and music, and
That's wild.
put up the playlist for the music. It was very nice.
Is this something were you involved in the construction of the scenery, or is this something that was already existent in Second World or Second Life that you took
Yeah,
advantage of?
mostly already existing. We in both those venues
Wow.
we did some decoration. I'll just put it that way. We
Okay.
put up some stuff appropriate for that way. But the
Okay.
locations existed. One was the Baha'i properties in Second Life, which are quite beautiful. They have a replica of the Indian Lotus Temple, and a Baha'i center and a library and beautiful gardens and peacocks in the gardens,
Wow, that's
and
crazy.
then the reception was held at a very fancy castle venue with an outdoor veranda, I guess you'd say. It was very nice.
Wow. There really is something. I guess that kind of maybe goes into you ending up building the conference center later because of maybe having experienced and holding an event and understanding what that can mean for someone and how it can advance a project to create a meeting space like that.
Yeah,
Maybe those two things went hand in hand. Who's to say?
yeah, yeah.
So now, when you first got involved with cryptocurrency and blockchain, and you first began asking questions and exploring that industry, did you look at it more of an investment opportunity or a vehicle for something else? Or was it financial purely to you, or how did you kind of view this technology at first?
Clearly, I saw it as an economic activity. In terms of investment, highly speculative. And it was, I joined it shortly before the SEC in the U.S. started clamping down on ICOs.
Okay.
And so people were starting to be very cautious about outlandish claims and the appearance of fraud or actual fraud. So I was very cautious, but I've been around, I've been in Silicon Valley on and off long enough to know what happens when people see dollar signs and go a little nuts.
Sure.
So I was looking for quality stuff, quality applications of this, and the idea Decentraland had of tokenizing the ownership of virtual land and tokenizing a virtual economy, that was pretty interesting. It really seemed to converge some things that I understood already with some things that were emerging. I thought this was going to be really important, allowing people to actually own land and have that ownership be durable no matter what happens to the company that started it.
Right.
That's pretty interesting.
I agree with you, and I think that's a very good point, and it makes me curious. In your own words, how would you describe the potential of this technology and projects that want to use this technology? Like, what kind of an impact do you think that can have on both the internet and people in day-to-day life?
Yeah. Well, I think, early on, a lot of the focus is likely to be various aspects of entertainment, games, racing, pulling levers and winning things. Who knows? I think that's a fairly immediate, biggest sort of attraction.
Sure.
But my view is that virtual experience is going to be a really important and significant part of human experience more and more into the future. I think we will have a lot of our social and learning experiences that way. I think we may meet with our medical professionals that way. Lower and higher education will probably adopt it to a large extent. Learning how to do things that might be dangerous, like operating certain equipment, or operating in environments you can't be physically present, like in a vacuum.
Right.
That the skills of gameplay, using a controller or your body in order to control something virtually. I think all these things are just going to be really important aspects of human development. And so, like all technologies, this can be used for good or bad. Technology is, pretty neutral, but what we do with it is not neutral. And I just wanted to weigh in on help shaping it towards what's beneficial. Education, conferring with each other, having good social relationships and stuff.
I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
I think the potential of virtual reality is, if not more endless than actual reality, I think the potential is the limit of imagination.
Yeah, and you said something I want to pick up on, which is doing things you can't do in the physical world. I mean, clearly, operating a very large robot, remotely, stuff like that is obvious. But I think some other stuff is not so obvious to people who haven't thought about or been involved in it. And In the virtual experiences I've been in, you often meet people who you come to learn are physically disabled or have severe social anxiety disorders or are autistic, have some very serious limitation in their physical world. You can't just toss out. It's, you're kind of stuck with it, right?
Right.
But you wouldn't know it in their virtual experience because they get to choose how to represent themselves, what their capabilities are as an avatar of running and dancing and doing stuff that they can't do because they're bedridden or in their wheelchair, or they have spina bifida, or they have very serious health problems. And I've met some people who I've come to learn that they're pretty severely autistic. Kind of almost don't know it in a virtual reality because something about that environment makes it more comfortable for them and more capable for them expressing themselves in ways that feel easier to engage with.
Wow,
it's really interesting. So I think it enlarges human potential in ways that you might not have imagined.
It makes me even more optimistic. You wanted to impact education and the development of developers working in VR and AR.
Yeah.
So you just were nominated Chancellor of Decentraland University, and I understand that you've taught one course so far in virtual reality.
Yes. The inaugural course of Decentraland University was this last summer.
How did that
go? There was, I think, about 60 people signed up. Not all of them finished the course, but a great number of people developed over a period of like 10 lessons, 10 weeks, developed skills that they didn't have before to build and deploy stuff in Decentraland, which requires a range of skills, artistic ones, technical ones, but even more collaborative ones. There were people in the class that were already pretty advanced in some one of those skills, but maybe not in other ones. Their skills advanced, but they also started working with each other and helping each other. I'm pretty excited about that. And some of them have ended up partnering with me after that in various endeavors of projects in Decentraland. So it's
a beautiful thing.
It's a very big thing.
About teaching others how to build worlds in VR. What is that experience like? I'm curious what types of things you have to be cognizant of and aware of while you're building a world. Like what types of things do you have to think of? What do you have to keep in mind to make it similar or intentionally vastly different from reality?
There are skills and technical skills that you have to master to some degree to be able to participate in building an experience. There's some programming skills that are required. Not, a scene or an experience doesn't have to be built by just one person. It can be built by a collaborative team of people with different skills that complement each other. But amongst those skills are some programming skills. In Decentraland, the scripts that control the behavior of a scene and that glue together the models are written in TypeScript, which is a typed version of JavaScript. And then the models themselves are something you can build in a modeling tool like Blender or Maya or one of those tools. Blender being free, it makes it easier to approach. That are stored or represented in a particular model format for Decentraland, which is the GLTF spec. When you're building an image, you might use Photoshop and say that it's a Photoshop file, but if you want to put it on a website, you don't put the Photoshop file up, you put a JPEG up or PNG, right?
Yeah, I see.
This GLTF format is to 3D model sort of like that. It's designed for delivery and rendering. So you create models and get them into that format, and you glue it together with script. But then, so far you just talked about the technology of it. The technique of it is artistry. So you have to make something that will engage an immersive and interesting experience for people who visit it. Now it may be targeted to a certain audience, but you want them to come in and have a reason to want to stay or participate or socialize or dance or make music or study or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. That's architecture, that's design, that's storytelling, visual composition, creating something that's attractive, stimulating our sense of beauty, a response to beauty, or maybe not to beauty, but something else that's engaging. You have to think about things like you enter a space, do you want to see everything at once? No, you don't. You want to find surprises. You want to have control lines of sight. You have to think about things on that level. too.
It's very interesting.
I guess you start with what goal are you after in creating this experience? Who is the audience? What would engage them? What's valuable to them? Storytelling is certainly part of it. I just think there's this really interesting area that's going to emerge I just think of it as a new form of literature or arts, which is really interactive response to stories. You probably know about Dungeons and Dragons, right? We have a dungeon master who kind of orchestrates what happens, what the rules are, somewhat preconceived and somewhat dynamically during the gameplay. So people participate in this because they have some control over the outcome, but they're also interacting socially with other agents that have their own idea, their own agendas, right?
Right.
And so, when you watch a movie or read a book, you have the authors or the movie making team's way of sharing a particular experience. I think virtual reality is take some of the interactive computer games, especially ones that are kind of quest oriented, to the next level where it may not be a game. Maybe you're trying to accomplish something together, or it goes all the way simply to pure social experience. But maybe you've created an environment that implies a certain sort of mindset or plot or purpose, but what actually happens, it has to do with the minds of the people who show up. I think it's pretty interesting. How do you architect that well?
That's a very good question to ask, and definitely something that a developer would have to keep in mind while each step along the way to the finished product.
Yeah.
Now, also, Decentraland is launching in less than a month, the end of January 2020 right now. We're looking at a February 20th launch date. From what you know about how Decentraland looks and how it's operating at the moment, is it living up to your expectations that you've had since you first got involved and engaged?
Yeah, I would say yes. I think there were a lot of people who had expectations that were unrealistic about how long it would take to build something as complex as Decentraland has a layer of complexity that's kind of unique in that everybody can build whatever they want on their land. It actually has to render and give you an experience that is made from many different pieces that different people put out, which may all be in view at the same time. Very different than a game which is designed as a unified thing. This is a heterogeneous collection of experiences, many of which may be visible and rendered at the same time. Pretty interesting and complex capability. Each one of those can have their own scripting and dynamic behaviors. And there's nobody predicting how it's all going to work, right? So that's a pretty complicated thing that they built from some early prototypes to going live in just a little over 2 years. I think it's very impressive development of space, really.
Yeah, the speed is insane. I'm very curious how the treasure hunt on the launch day is going to go. And I want to know, will you be there?
I think what I'm going to actually be doing is being very busy trying to get some things in place that I hadn't quite got in place by the February 20th. I'm planning to launch a kind of grand opening at the conference center, and I'm actually scheduling it intentionally after the treasure hunt. I don't want people to think, gee, should I go to this or should I go to that? So we're shooting for the weekend of the 29th to have an open house party. We have a DJ that's going to be playing some live music. We'll probably have pizza out. Good time.
Fantastic.
But, an opportunity for people to come and really ask questions about the conference center and how they might want to get involved. We have office spaces. We have, meeting venues. It'd be the beginning of really having conversations with visitors about making use of the space.
Right. That makes me wonder, what do you think this ecosystem is going to look like down the road? 2-3 years? Do you think as much has developed as the past 2 years?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of things that will come. I think more dynamic capability in the scenes in terms of what interaction with them can cause to happen, where the content can come from, skill development amongst people building the scenes, advances in the rendering capabilities, so better performance, more development around audio. You might think we are visually oriented, but I can tell you if the sound isn't right, it just doesn't work. So you're very conscious of the visual, and you're not so conscious of the sound. But if you have a little glitch in the video, in the visual, your brain just is fine with it. If you have a glitch in the audio, it's really disturbing, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have some mood music or some crickets in the background or a little bit of wind sound or something, it just doesn't feel real. So sound development is going to be really important. And ideally, eventually interact. So that while you're in world, you're doing something that changes the sound. It's not just canned sound. So I think that stuff will come over the next few years. Another thing that will change, I think, quite a bit is the capabilities of the avatars. This is an area where Decentraland has some catching up to do with regard by comparison to, say, to Second Life. Second Life, the avatars are incredibly rigged now. You can move your fingers in and out. You can raise one eyebrow.
Wow.
It's pretty. And the faces are very realistic. Decentraland still has, and I don't mean to be disparaging, a little bit more of a cartoon look. Low poly look, well. And they picked a low poly look strategically because they want to be able to render on low-end machines and people's browsers. Decentraland is one of the very few virtual experiences you can go to, which you can literally get a URL from somebody and click on it, and you're in the experience. So you don't have to install a client.
They want it to keep it easy to load for no matter where the user is.
It's challenging enough with the complexity of the world even today. It can take half a minute or something for a scene to load. But they wanted it to be very, very easy for people to come in, and to do that they chose a low poly look. But if you put good texture maps on things, it can still look pretty good. So I think avatars are going to get more interesting. Avatar wearables are already starting to become interesting. Part of what people do in virtual world is they work on identity development. Okay, I can present myself in the way that I choose to, as opposed to the way that I was born with. I can say that I want to be taller. I can say I want to be older or younger. Be human. I can be a dragon.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. Could you be you could be anything.
Yes. That's really interesting experimentation with identity. Obviously, gender fluidity is a thing you see in virtual worlds. I have a friend in Second Life. He's male, and he always presents as male, as far as I know. But sometimes when he's doing construction work, he comes in as a boy. Yeah, a very young person. For him, it's part of almost a therapeutic experience he's having about reliving and reworking some of his childhood experiences of successfully creating creative work.
Right. That is interesting. Yeah, it definitely deserves a second look.
It can play a therapeutic role or a learning role in many ways.
Wow, that's fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
To be able to take some therapeutic aspects away from where you're spending your time and where you're building.
It's just fun because I have, when I'm in Second Life, I have an avatar that I usually appear as, kind of young, tall man. I'm neither young nor tall in real life. But my wife helped craft the look that she wanted in my avatar.
There you go.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Yes. Anyways, but I also, I have a wolf and a small black cat. No, an avatar. Sometimes I come into the world as a wolf or a black cat or a large feline animal, or I do have a few dragon avatars.
Could you create an animal that you could later be, like a blob with one eye? That just rolls around.
Sure, you could. I have a few avatars. I have an avatar that's a tree.
That's so cool. What about like a beer can with legs and arms?
Yeah, I have a Pikachu avatar.
That's awesome. Now this is all Second Life, right?
Yeah, Second Life. The avatar development is just years ahead there of where Decentraland is today. Although I expect that it won't take that long for Decentraland to catch up.
Right. Speaking of which, I heard that you have a plug for different avatar costumes or NFTs for your avatar.
That's not me, but that is definitely going on in Decentraland. That part of the economy of a virtual world is identity development. That means avatars, clothing, accessories, homes, gardens, the surround of your environment, all that stuff. Is part of the economy of Second Life. You go to the marketplace, you buy what you want, and you use it or you wear it. That will develop in Decentraland. It's begun to. And a unique thing about Decentraland is they're using tokenized tokens, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, to represent that inventory item, that unique item in the world, which you can wear or have. And so you could go to a store in Decentraland and buy this thing. What you're actually obtaining is the token that has the metadata of that object. And then you can wear it or put it in your environment.
I think that's awesome. I can't wait for it to get as developed as, say, I don't know, an Xbox or a PlayStation is, to the point where it has X amount of years of people developing and building different kinds of games and mini games and
Yeah.
costumes, avatars, and creating, most importantly, tools for other people to create their own desires and wishes.
Let me tell you another reason why it's interesting: convergence of blockchain and virtual worlds.
Please.
There are virtual worlds that have existed and have stopped existing. We even have some. The company went out of business.
Oh, okay. Like it's no longer live. Or...
No longer. I think High Fidelity is shut down. There was another one that nearly shut down, and somebody bailed them out. But it's a hard.
Because there's
not every project like this succeeds. But one of the things about Decentraland that's interesting is they are quite consciously building an infrastructure that will not depend on their corporate reality indefinitely. It's independent. It runs on the blockchain. It's permanent, and they're already doing things to decentralize the governance, the infrastructure, so that there's not a place that if you turn that off, the world stops. So Decentraland is likely to be very durable.
That's interesting. It also sounds like it'll be somewhat democratic if it's going to survive on its own.
They're setting up a decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, for initially for managing changes to their smart contracts. Okay. If they find a bug, if they decide that if there's something that needs to be improved, the DAO can manage through voting, electronic voting based on that you hold currency or you hold that you can vote on, is it acceptable for this change to be made to the smart contract? And if it votes, then the change gets made.
Right. I find it super interesting that...
We're breaking up a little bit here.
Yeah, I'm getting some interference. All right. So we were just talking about changes in governance and the consensus within Decentraland that will allow it to operate free of any central party. It seems very democratic, and it's interesting to me because it doesn't have to be. It's just what seems to make the most sense to the participants that are involved, the people with skin in the game.
Yeah, I have a perspective on it that puts it in context, I guess. I think the dynamics or the protagonists in a society are three. The individual. Individuals are who do things, right? Individual initiative. That's how things actually happen. Is people do things. And then a collection of people having a consensus, a worldview, a conversation, dynamics, memes, all that. You call that community. Community is another protagonist in society. I think about the Arab Spring. Think about the Arab Spring. That wasn't an individual. That was a community dynamic that had an effect. And it was that is a protagonist. And the third one is institutions. Be they elected, be they autocratic, whatever, bureaucratic, well-run, whatever, institutions. So these are the three different power centers in society. And in a healthy society, they're in pretty good equilibrium with each other. Yeah. If you have an autocrat and people are suppressed, you're going to have a revolution, right? Yeah. If you have a bureaucracy, the community will get frustrated with it, and there'll be a change. If you have only individual initiative and no coordination of community culture and institutions, you're going to have to fix the potholes in front of your own house, right?
Right.
If there's even a street there. So in a healthy society, it's very complex. You have all these different kinds of players. The emergence of decentralized autonomous organizations, they're sort of an expression of community, but really I think they're institutions. I think that's what they really are. If they're well designed, and if the community really has some dynamic with it that helps shape the DAO, then it could be a really good thing. But a totally autonomous computing system that has no human community, individual initiative role would be perhaps the worst kind of dictator, is because it would be perhaps just dumb, a misfit for tomorrow's needs, right?
Right.
So I'm just fascinated by what's going on with the emergence of these new democratic experiments with DAOs and Decentraland's decision to start setting aside some of their centralized control, call that autocratic, I guess, it's an institution, to an experiment in DAO governance. Just very fascinating. But
too. It
you
is
know,
fascinating.
but what's going on really in Decentraland is a ton of individual initiative and a fair amount of community.
It's interesting watching all of this play out and how it's reflected in virtual reality, but it's very exciting because some people that don't get to experience that kind of democratic freedom in their day-to-day life can experience that online. And
I guess that would be overcoming a disability, right?
Yeah, that's
A
true.
socially imposed disability of maybe a really repressive society.
Right. I mean, there's very obvious questions about a decentralized world that operates on its own. You know, bad actor agents or people that have nefarious intentions that arrive in the world and start doing things that are blatantly offensive to 99% of the participants involved. How can you let that world engage and how they will respond to?
Yeah. It's a conundrum, really, because there's a high degree of desire to have this world be decentralized,
Censorship.
not have central control, not have censorship, not have it be something that can be shut down by some actor, be it governmental or whatever, but also wanting it to be not awful, not an awful experience for people that live there or hang out there or work there or want to visit there. And so, you know, my first statement is that's a cultural development. You know, culture is the stuff that people know about how to interact, but it's not written down anywhere.
Right.
Policy is written down, laws are written down. Culture is what everybody knows, and they hardly have to say. So, you know, just a culture of some virtues like tact and courtesy and collaboration and mutual respect and things like that, you know, they seem to be growing. I'm watching the trend of culture in Decentraland over 2 years, which you might say, well, where's the world? The world exists on Discord. It's all these communities of people working on different projects and districts. And, you know, there's just hundreds of people involved already, very creatively. I think they now have thousands of people in the beta. So watching this culture develop, and if I compare today to 2 years ago there was a fair amount of conflict, because I think a lot of people said, I want to be able to do anything I want. I don't like it. You know, thank you for creating this, but I want your influence. I want to do whatever I want, right? Yeah. And now people have been collaborating for 2 years, and I think there's a lot of change of heart about that we're making something pretty interesting. Let's not break it on day one.
So you don't think there will be any kind of bad actors for the most part?
No, I'm sure there will be. I'm sure there will be.
It's
the question,
inevitable at some point.
Who can do what about it? You put up a gigantic phallus on your property, and your neighbor's going to put up gigantic walls around it, right?
Right.
There's some kind of social dynamics around this stuff too, but also kind of like, you know, no, come on, property owner, I want to bring my kids in here. Can you just do something else than that?
Yeah.
So I think communication, development of culture is really interesting. Decentraland is making efforts to curate the content early. So they have a builder tool. They provide free content. It has a certain sort of look and style, and it's not X-rated. You know, it's sci-fi stuff, it's fantasy stuff, it's kind of natural stuff. And that's the stuff that's easily being populated in the world. And most of the people I know that are more advanced in using their own skills to build models and things, they're building it within a normal range. I mean, there's, you know, maybe some dance venues for adult entertainment, but, you know, I haven't seen anything awful. Right. Anything I, you know, take my
sure. I just can't help but wonder.
I'm sure that'll develop in certain areas, and I think that, you know, the whole world won't be of one style. Second Life certainly isn't. There's everything there from something you'd be fine to take your kids to, something you wouldn't dare take your kids to, and there's a rating system. In Second Life, each scene, each I don't mean scene, each region has a rating of general, mature, and adult. And if you know, if you put adult stuff in a general channel, somebody's gonna raise their hand to the central authority of Linden Labs, and to the extent that they have the resources to deal with it, they will try to deal with it. They have the ability to shut down a sim. I didn't do it very often. They tend to be pretty hands off, but there is a cultural, social. It has developed that most of that adult stuff is over there,
right?
In a place where if you wanted that, that's where you go. I think there will be an interesting thing as Decentraland steps back from control. It will be, you know, there will be episodes of people trying to push the envelope on what that means they can do.
Right.
It'd be very interesting. I expect there'll be some bad days and then
sure.
a lot of really cool times.
Yeah.
And the world's big enough that if there's a bad thing going on over there, you goes 4 parcels away and you can't see it anymore.
Right. It's very motivating to hear how optimistic you are for the future of this virtual world building. It's inspiring.
Well, I'm optimistic for humanity, and what I see in Decentraland is like some of the most cutting edge thinking about governance and free will and the role of individuals and communities and institutions. So I think it's pretty interesting.
It certainly is fascinating. I have just a couple other questions I want to ask you. How much time a week or a month on a busy week do you spend in VR? What is that like? And how much time can you spend working in VR before you start to feel bonkers?
Well, okay, so let's get real clear. A virtual experience does not necessarily mean a VR headset.
Okay.
So Second Life, except for a few experiments they did on a beta once, they've never had the ability to support a VR headset because you have to have a very high frame rate and very low lag. Like if you turn your head and the picture goes like this and then goes back, you get motion sick quite quickly and you recover quite slowly. It's not fun. To be able to wear a virtual reality headset, the world has to be very high performance. Gotcha. There aren't very many that are.
So most of this work and development just happens on a computer, or?
Yes, absolutely.
So
I have put a headset on a few times. A little bit with experiments in Second Life. There's a VR lab at Turbo Squid, and I had a chance to go spend a couple hours there once playing some games. The immersive effect is profound. Kept the headset on for about an hour, and I did feel a little queasy by the end. And I spend many hours a week, sometimes many hours a day, working on Decentraland stuff, especially on the weekends. And it would be an unpleasant experience if I was getting motion sick in the first 20 minutes. So most developers of VR do this. They do this.
Right.
That's what development looks like in VR. Is coding and design with your headset off, and then you put it on. Maybe. And Decentraland is not a virtual reality yet. You can't. There's not a headset support for it yet. It will come.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also curious. What are you looking forward in development-wise to see? Let's say we, scoot 15 years, 20 years down the road, and everything that's right now cooking has an opportunity to truly grow and get to that point. What are you most excited about? What do you hope to see in Carl's perfect world in 15, 20 years? What is available to the individual?
Yeah, applications on top of blockchain, not blockchain itself. I mean, blockchain is a really important way to deal with data for certain applications.
Sure. Can you elaborate?
Well, I mean, for example, just take Decentraland. The fact that they have an economy of land and currency that's just independent of other economics. Fungible. I mean, you can go buy mana with dollars.
Right.
You can go sell mana with dollars. You can go earn money in mana or Ethereum or something in Decentraland. Take it out. People, the creative artists in Second Life, I think in 2015 or something, took out tens of millions of dollars in income that they earned in world, making things and selling them, renting land, etc. So I think that the fact that it's a mechanism for an economy within its own scope, but it is interactive with other economies. I think that's real. Tokenization of unique things, NFTs. I think that's going to be interesting. Being able to own part of a Mona Lisa.
Yes, the decentralization of fine art.
Tokenization of fine art, and the fact that you could own a share in something, real estate, an investment, something valuable, or own the whole thing as a token, and it's tokenized. Probably opens up new opportunities for artists who are creating things to tokenize it from the beginning, and that token follows the artwork through its whole life and manages, clarity about who participated in that line of creative work. There's people working on that stuff, and it's, I think, pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it opens up so many opportunities.
Sorry to interrupt, but quite a while ago, I worked at Borland around the time that Borland was a company that made development tools. Competed pretty well with Microsoft for a while, for example.
Okay.
And I worked there in their engineering department for some time. At the time I was there, the idea and tooling for development of mobile applications was just coming online. Android didn't exist yet, iOS didn't exist yet, but there was a Symbian operating system for some of the old bricks, and these new things were emerging. You could predict that they would come. Borland was building development tools for mobile development. And in Silicon Valley, there was the question out there in the VC mindset, what's going to be the killer app for mobile, for smartphones? Well, today, I have literally over 200 apps on my phone. There's not a killer app. And I had this idea, I'm sorry, there is a killer app. It's called the Google Play Store.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Where did I get 200 apps? Right?
Yeah.
That I think that speaks to your question about what's interesting about blockchain is that it opens up a whole new realm of possible applications of data, of finance, of ownership, of governance, of proofs, of truth, in a time when all those things are such flux.
Right. That leads me to two other important questions I have that will, I think, hopefully describe a little bit more of how you view the world. And my first question is, the very first blockchain, the very first peer-to-peer decentralized network, Bitcoin, was obviously created by an anonymous figure, Satoshi Nakamoto. And I'm curious, in your world and in your mind, what type of entity is most likely to have been Satoshi? Was it one person? Was it a group? And if it was one person, what kind of person do you think it was? Or if it was a group, what type of group of minds or citizens? How would you describe this anonymous figure?
Well, some interesting characteristics. Clearly, pretty strong mathematical knowledge.
Right.
And a realization of the application of that to something that didn't exist yet in the form of a new foundation for economics. Those two things don't usually, most people don't have that deep of understanding in two areas. So it was either a very brilliant individual or, a little think tank that figured this stuff out and then represented itself as an individual, and I have no idea. I don't have any secret inside information on that one. It was a person, that person is remarkably silent, and therefore they might not still be alive. I don't know. If they are alive, they have immense wealth that they haven't spent any of. So it sort of points to that they can't, or that they're really, really altruistic. I'm not sure which.
Okay. After reading some of Satoshi's writings, there was mentions of all altruism.
Yeah.
I actually read one post of his today about how he believed in some rare cases that altruism could keep the network alive in cases where it wouldn't otherwise survive.
Yes. Yep.
Super interesting. And one other question I have is, I heard in another interview that you have that you own land in Decentraland. I'm curious, is that land ownership more speculative, or do you look at it as a small investment, or do you have plans to build something? And if so, what would you build on your land?
Yeah, all of the above. Depends upon the day of the week and the face of the moon.
Perfect.
I haven't liquidated anything that I've owned there yet.
Okay.
Just a little. You know what? I actually liquidated some mana a year or two ago to put some better storm shutters on my house. I live in a hurricane zone, and my old electric shutters were breaking. So I said, I can take some virtual reality and shore up my physical reality with it. But other than that, I'm in it for the long haul. Mana went way up at one point and it's come back down most of the way since. And once in a while I have thought, gee, maybe I should have sold some of it then, but I'm glad I didn't, because I actually want it for the future.
Right.
And I think that the way I will, if you want to say monetize it, is through generation of income. I have this, I'm very fortunate to have had the opportunity to end up with a fair amount of land, either of private land or involvement in districts. I think that they will generate revenue. They will give me business opportunities. I may liquidate them someday when I retire. I don't know. Probably not. Probably use them to have fun when I retire. So,
at least have one for personal, private, fun use.
Yeah, I have a couple of very nice estates in Decentraland and kind of remote places where I could have set up a family compound or whatever. But
Yeah.
most of my time right now is spent on some districts, especially the conference center and Ethereum are getting most of my attention right now, and the virtual reality shopping district. Those three, I'm getting probably 3/4 of my time in Decentraland.
That's awesome. Also, are there any kind of cues or hints about the next uh, course you might have for anybody that wants
We're
to?
breaking up some again. I'm not sure how the record.
All right. Real quick before and we get going, I'm curious, are there any details yet about the next course or the next academy option for Decentraland University and anybody that wants to learn how to build their own scene?
The course that I did that had a course document that had learning segments in it, plus an assignment at the end. There were 10 I think there were 10 of them. And each of those sessions involved a live conversation session with the class. It was done, we did it on Zoom.
Okay.
And they were all recorded, and they're up in YouTube. And that document with the assignments is in YouTube. So it's now an open standing course that anybody can take. There's not a fee for it. Donations are welcome, of course. So anybody that's interested can go. Here's the path you would go. You would go from scratch. You'd go to the decentraland.org website, follow the link from there to their Discord server, find a channel in their Discord server for the university, follow the links in there to get to the university Discord, and then look for the VR Academy channels in the university Discord. And in the pinned messages there, you will find a link to the document. The document has a link to the videos and the assignment materials. So awesome. That's a partial answer. I expect we will run that course again at some point. Be obviously updated some, since there's things that have happened since that was put together. I don't have a date in mind, but maybe a year hence from when we did it the first time, like this summer or something.
Awesome.
But there will probably be some other courses. There's other schools being set up at the university. So.
That's very good to know. And for any listeners that are interested, I will link that Google document with the course information as well as the Discord invites to the Building on Blockchain Part 7 article, which can be found at elc.team. Besides that, do you have any questions for me, Carl, before we get going?
No, I just I'm curious to know what brought Decentraland to your attention.
Well, I've always been somewhat interested in VR and AR. I had one experience with an HTC Vive, which for anybody listening that doesn't know what that is, it's an over-the-head headset where you're submersed visually and audibly. Everything you see and hear is taking place in VR. It's tethered to your computer, so if you walk too far away, you'll just pull your tower, pull your monitor right off your desk. So I had an experience, and I was sat there for maybe an hour and a half. I did a couple adventure games, and I did a horror game. I did this horror game for maybe 45 minutes, and it scared the living crap out of me. I remember taking off this headset, and I was shook to my core, and I was also like almost pissed off that I could be so shook with what felt like originally an inauthentic experience. I like wasn't inside this haunted house, but as soon as I took off the headset, I was like, I was sitting there and I was shaking. And that's when I truly realized, like, holy crap, you can literally create and experience anything that you can think of, you know, to a certain extent. Obviously, it won't ever be as good as experience something in the real world. There's just too many variables you can't account for to make anything as fluid as this reality we have. But by all means, that is a close second. So when I saw the potential that had and I was able to experience it myself, I stored that away in my head. I didn't really act on it. It wasn't my VR set. And then when I ended up watching a Ready Player One movie. I never read the book, and I understand there's a couple other popular books that have to deal with virtual worlds and realities. And I saw the movie and kind of witnessed a visual representation of the potential that the technology had. And that's when it truly dawned on me, like, you can literally, like, everyone in the world, we could have, like, Decentraland in my mind is a country. It's like its own nation state that's developing right now. Like we talked about them figuring out consensus and how it's going to operate on its own. It's basically an offshore country that anyone in the world is allowed to visit and experience those rules and those laws. that type of limitless scenario is so attractive to me. And
Yeah.
when I saw that there was a company going after that to create that kind of idea and build those tools where anybody can go on and build that, I was hooked. And so, and after watching their initial fundraising round raised $25 million in under a minute. Yeah, it was during a fairly unreasonable, irrational bull market bubble cycle, however you want to call it. It was still a lot of fun to watch, and it also showed me how many other individuals and entities are interested in creating the same kind of tool. I think it's moving way faster than I ever thought it would, and I am interested to see where this goes. It still feels like square one. They're at ground level zero, considering they haven't launched yet, but they're also farther ahead than they've ever been, and it's going to keep getting better. And I think it's awesome. I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for people around the world that can't experience the freedom of networking, or being able to do something in a democratically run area. There's so many people that experience just complete regime that controls their social aspects and their family home life, and they're stuck with those cards until they have the resources to change them. And for this, all you need is an internet connection. More
So
or
you,
less.
you, you made me think about something from something you said,
Yeah.
which I'd like to share, which is, my worldview is that we are spiritual beings in a material experience. That there's, the part of you that got scared wearing that headset, it wasn't your body, right?
No.
It was the passenger in your vehicle, right?
Yep.
So I believe that the best use that we can make of our time here is to make good choices and to be a benefit to each other, right?
Right.
Because we are a social creature. So when we have an experience in the physical world, we store it in our memory. We store what we learned from it in potentially a pretty durable and even transformative way. It's the same when you see a movie. It's the same when you have a dream. It's the same when you read a book. It's the same when you daydream and make some decisions. And it is the same when you're in a virtual reality. You will probably attest to this, but I know it's true. I have memories from my life, from all those kinds of experiences. And some profound ones came from experiences that I had in virtual reality. Almost always what made them profound was something social, something with other human actors. Okay, so I don't think that our memory storage system, which I suspect outlives our body, we take it to whatever we experience next. We remember this, so it's stored somewhere other than just in our brain. But I think that we store those experiences independent. I mean, it doesn't matter how we had them. It has to do with what we did, the decisions we made, how we responded. Did we grow? Did we learn? Right? And virtual reality is absolutely another way that can happen. It's as important as literature or art or movies or music. It's just another venue for human creation and experience. So
It's a beautiful thing. Those are beautiful closing remarks as well. I think it's one hell of an opportunity, and I am glad to find and to be able to learn from someone like you who's on the ground floor helping people make that happen. I think in 20, 30 years come, the types of conversations and the coursework that you're doing and the network and the experiences that you're having, I think many other people are going to learn from, and I think it's going to be one hell of a positive influence on the building of virtual worlds and where we're going with that.
well, thank you.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for giving me some
Thank
of your
you.
time. I love being able
Sure.
to pick your brain about something that is happening right now as we speak and will only get better and more popular in years to come. So thank you very
Thank
much.
you for
I really
inviting me.
appreciate it.
Alrighty.
All right. I will talk to you soon, Carl Fravel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.